It's my pleasure to introduce, I'm going to say a new friend in many ways, to me. Many of you have known him a long, long time. Joel Lineberger. Joel is in our community. He's a teacher. He's a ministry leader in his church. He's a coach. He's just a lot. His father, husband. You name it, Joel's probably been around it. He runs the Mount Holly Community Pool in the summer, so just lots and lots of fun things. As I was preparing for this, I was talking to Joel the other day, and I'm going to get a nasty call from my son. But I was asking Joel, I said, do you remember when you and I met? And he thought for a moment, he's like, well, did we meet at the pool? And I'm like, no, before then. Went back and forth, he goes, no, I don't really remember. And I said, well, you were an assistant principal at Stuart Kramer High School, and you called me one day, and you introduced yourself. You said, hi, I'm Joel Lineberger, I'm the assistant principal at Stuart Kramer, and you said, I need you to come get your son because I'm suspending him. Riley would be okay with me sharing that. Most of y'all probably know that anyway. The reason I say that is because when I started thinking about who would be good guests to invite to have these conversations, I was reminded of that interaction. And that's got to be a tough thing for an assistant principal or a school administrator. You can probably talk to Reeves about it. It's probably got to be a tough thing to do anyway, because you really never know how the parent's going to react. And I imagine a lot of times the reaction wasn't great. But one of the things that I remember distinctly was the compassion that Joel had for me when he called me on the phone. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He got right to the point, told me what was going on, but you could just tell he had compassion for me as a parent. And when I went to pick Riley up, I could also see the compassion that he had for my son as a person. And that kind of has stuck with me. And so then when we started thinking about who can we talk to in our community about their journeys and their spiritual gifts, that kind of came back to me. I'm like, let me see if Joel would be interested in doing this. So that's why Joel, that's one of the reasons why Joel is here this evening. So thank you for taking the time to do it. We don't script this, so we did have a conversation just to touch on some high-level points, and so we're just, it's a little bit free-flowing. But I want to start with Joel, if you'll just kind of talk, and by the way, where's Tori? So one of the things I also learned in getting to know Joel is Joel was Tori's teacher. So that either tells us how young Tori is or how old Joel is. And I'm not going to make that decision. Y'all figure that out.
Oh.
Okay. So one of the things, Joel, that came up in the conversations you and I have had, and just sitting here eating supper a few minutes ago, was you keep coming back to, you've said this several times out loud, kind of, why me? Why do you want to hear from me? So, and in my mind, I think of that, well, that's a pretty humble response. But maybe there's something else. So you want to start with there and kind of, what got you thinking, why me?
I'm not real sure. I mean, it keeps going through my mind when I was asked to come do this. I jumped at the opportunity because I like being in front of people. Obviously, I'm a teacher. I get nervous when I'm in front of bigger kids like you, but I enjoy being able to talk to people and to be able to share what's on my heart. But it always surprised me when I was first asked to come and be up here, because for me, I don't think I'm anything special. I do stuff. That's all I look at is, when you start listing off the things that I do, I'm just like, well, that's just what I do, I guess. So I was a bit surprised whenever it was me that was asked to be up here to talk about spiritual gifts.
Yeah, and I think, you can unpack that a little bit more as to, in even digging into the gift that is in and of itself in some ways. And we're going to get into some of the things that Joel actually does and how he has seen God at work in that and how he's discerned spiritual gifts along the way. The other thing you told me when we were talking last Friday that I think is pretty interesting and pretty telling, you actually, Scott Griffin was a mentor to you as a teacher at Ida Rankin, and you talked about I wrote it down as spotlight analogy.
Right.
Will you share that with everybody?
So he always refers to there being two types of leaders, and it always refers to the spotlight. And so sometimes there's people who, whenever they're a leader, when they're in front of people, they take that spotlight and they shine it like this, right there at themselves. So you know that they're the leader. And sometimes that's what's required. Sometimes that's the type of leaders that you need, is someone who's willing to stand up in front of that spotlight and be there. But for me, I'm one of these people who, I'm taking that spotlight, I'm gonna shine it on the people who are around me. I'm gonna try to find places where I can highlight like what they're doing. And that's what G taught me.
I thought that was pretty cool, and I also think that's part of someone's gift to be able to kind of grasp that and say, I'm going to emulate that. So in many ways, I think that's kind of interesting as we think about how we apply our gifts and how we can use our gifts to either hold up or spotlight others around us. Knowing that it's really for the glory of God and it's not about us anyway. So let's talk about the things that you do that aren't really about you anyway. So you mentioned to me that you basically born into First United Methodist Church.
Yes.
So as much as you're comfortable sharing, would you just share with folks about kind of your being led to a profession of faith?
First off, I'm going to start this off with, I'm an emotional guy. So I might get choked up. I'll apologize now. I'm going to do my best. But I just came into being the youth leader. We call it the Youth Ministries Coordinator, I think is my official title or something like that. Which sounds fancy for just the guy that goes in there and tells the kids, hey, let's go play. But we had been without a youth leader for like 3 years. We had someone over our youth and over the children's ministry who did a phenomenal job, like working with them and providing chances and opportunities. And Pastor Mike was there, and he did a phenomenal job, like trying to help provide opportunities for the youth. But there was nobody designated and in that position of youth leader. There was about sometime during last summer, I remember riding down the road, coming home from church, and like it hit me like a brick wall. I mean, I felt like I had just crashed. And I was like, this is a great idea, because we didn't have we were in need of a new choir leader too. And I said, Carrie, my wife, is this phenomenal musician and could easily do the choir director job. I said, Carrie, why don't you do the choir director job? And I'll do the youth ministry, and it'll be amazing. Like, we'll just be really hopeful. I mean, let's just buy into just being a huge part of this church. And like a couple days later, like we kept talking about it. A couple days later, she said, it's just not on my heart to do that. That's just not what I'm going to do. And like, I guess my balloon wasn't burst, but it was kind of, let out a little bit. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm sure they'll find somebody. Another month or two passes by. They still don't have anybody, and they're still looking for, applicants and things. And then it hit me again. Well, why not you? Why not me? So I applied. And it has been being able to be that for my church, for my own 2 daughters, just being able to be there for them. And like, I worried a bit about how my daughters would react. Like, all right, your dad's your youth leader. Like, I can't be, full out Emma or full out Hannah like they normally would be in youth. But I sat down with each of them beforehand and talked to them individually and said, I said, Emma, what do you think? Would you still want me to do this? Would you be okay if I did this? She was shocked. She said, I love it. Okay. You don't hear teenagers say that very often. And then I asked my middle child, Hannah, who is a true to form middle child. I said, Hannah, like, what would you think? Would you be okay if I was? She was like, sure. That was a great reaction. That was perfect. I was like, that means she's going to love for me to be the youth leader. I hope. But for them to be able to be themselves still, and for them to see and hear from me this much of my spirit and my love for God, and to hear them openly talk about it too, it's been refreshing, and it's really, really opened up my heart. And I know that it takes up some time on Wednesdays, and I know it takes up a lot of time on Sundays, but like it's, you know, when someone says, wow, I can't believe like the work that you're doing for our youth. I love how much you're doing for our youth. You're just, I'm like, I'm just like getting by, I think. You know, but we're having fun doing it, and you know, people think it's a big job, but I mean, it's really not. It's just once you start doing it, the first Sunday that I did youth, I was a nervous wreck. But after a couple times and meeting with them and talking to them and getting into it, I mean, it just kind of flows now. It gets easier. But there was a voice that, like, it honestly felt like there was a real voice that spoke to me out loud and said, you should do that. It was like, I thought it had to be me and Carrie wrapped up to do it together, but she's so supportive and so excited to see us both working and helping out with this, that I was like, this was the answer I was supposed to do.
So, as I hear you talk about this, just from the way you talk about it, it's obvious to me at least that you're carrying out a gift that you were given, but you're doing it in this way of, I grew up in this church, I can do something for this church, but it's really not as simple as, well, I can do a task, and so I'm going to do a task. As you talked about, you've talked about this voice, and this really what is a calling, and leads me to one of the other aspects of your life, which we have several, 2 or 3, I think, in the room right now, teachers or former teachers, and you and I were talking, and I was sharing with you, like, it took me forever and a day of my career to realize, you know, nobody wakes up one day and says, I want to run a homeless shelter. And you know, it's a calling. I think a lot of people kind of early in life, and certainly in past generations, it was kind of like, well, you'll be a teacher. That's your kind of route. But we're fortunate at Rankin that we have several male elementary school teachers, but that's still kind of an anomaly. So talk to us a little bit about how you discerned at some point in your life that one of your gifts was teaching.
Is it okay to say I don't know? I know that when I was in high school, I'll go way, way back. I know that when I was in high school, my plan was to be an architect. That was my dream. I'd had that dream for a long time, honestly. And then my guidance counselor called me during the summer before my senior year, and she said, I need you to be in this class instead of the art class that you're needing to show your artistic stuff. And I was like, Ms. Cloninger, I really don't want to do that. She said, but I really need you in this class. It's going to be the first one of these classes to have in Gaston County schools. And we need a couple more people to fill this class out. And Ms. Cloninger, who was an absolute angel, you can't say no to her. You could not say no to her. So I said, fine, all right, I'll do it. And I said, but Ms. Cloninger, I want you to know the class is called Teacher Cadet. And I told her, I said, there's no way I'm going to be a teacher. No way whatsoever. I started doing the class, you know, just doing the assignments that we were asked to do. Then we got to do like an internship in high school where you get to go to different classrooms around the county each morning for our first period class. That's where we spent the first hour and a half of high school was in a classroom. And I ended up in Mr. G's class. And he said, now listen, Joel, don't come into my classroom if you're not really going to be a teacher. I said, I'm not really going to be a teacher, but he's like, all right, well, just remember you said that. I said, yes, sir, I'll remember. So 2 weeks later, I said, Mr. G, what do I need to do? I want to be a teacher. So, I think it's then that, like, being in the classroom and in the element of it, and being around the children, and being in the school building, I think is what made my heart realize this is what I want to do. And it was exciting to think about that that's what I was going to do, is I was going to do something that I really would want to do for the rest of my life. I knew everybody talked about, well, teacher paid this, and, times are going to be hard, and there's going to be all these requirements and all this. And I was like, but, if you love it, you just do it. And that's just kind of stuck with me, is that very first time when I came up to Mr. G and said, I think I want to be a teacher. Like, I'll never forget that, because remembering that first, I guess the first time it hit me is what never goes away. You got to remember that first time that your heart said, that's what I want. And when you hold on to that the whole time, it doesn't matter what things are like. But it was just kind of like I don't know, it seemed like it was just luck that I happened into all that, though.
Well, it's also interesting that I think most of us can relate that at some point we all had this kind of dream of what we wanted to be or what we were going to do. And some of them were architects of realistic dream. I had a dream of being a pro baseball player, and that was probably not very realistic, but it was a dream. But for those realistic dreams, so often the path goes in a different direction. And I think there are a lot of ways that we can talk about it, but I think one of the ways that we should talk about it is, well, how was God at work in my life to, whether I realized it or not, or whether I could even admit it or not, but God was at work in my life kind of guiding me in these directions. And when you and I were having a conversation last week, I used a word and you bristled at it. I'm going to use this word again. And one of the things that I see in Joel that I believe is one of his true spiritual gifts is that of humility. This why me? This, well, why not me? I can do it, And I asked you if that was one of your gifts, and you really bristled at that.
Yeah.
You want to, why would somebody saying, well, I think one of your gifts is humility, why would that make you bristle?
I'm not real sure. Like, I've never thought about that as being one of my gifts, is being humble. Like I said, sitting up here and talking about, like, my calling into teaching and into the youth, I still wonder, and when people come up and say, you're just doing such an amazing job with the youth, or like the parents, like, my child just loves being in your classroom. I'm just like, we're just having fun, I don't wear that weight or that compliment on me. I wear that compliment on the kids that are around me and the people that are supporting me, the people that are there with me, my wife and family who put up with me doing like 55,000 different things and jump right in the car and we all go together.
So if I were the prosecutor, then I think I have an airtight case that humility is one of your spiritual gifts. I mean, I kind of, in addition to teaching, there's some ground to cover here, and I want to make sure we hit on some of these, because there's a couple of passions that Joel has that I want to give him a chance to talk about. But in addition to teaching, Joel is a volunteer coach in the community. I got the chance to watch him in action because Sarah was on his soccer team this past fall. She had never played before. She only wanted to play because we were able to get one of her cousins on the team. Her cousin would only play because she was on the team. There wasn't, and so we had no idea what we were getting into. None of them knew anything. The most talented player on the team was Wyatt, your son. But again, one of the things I took away that I shared with Joel was, it's one thing to, it's a sport. Okay, so we got to learn the fundamentals and the skills, and many of us can learn how to do that and whatnot. But the thing that Molly and I took away from that experience was the skills in the game were secondary, I think, at best. we watched how Joel just throughout the season was like, he even after the first practice, I promise you, after the first practice, he came over and to us as parents, he said, and he had this little piece of paper, he goes, my objectives for the day were, and it was like sportsmanship. And it was like getting to know each other. And we watched through the season and they had a decent season. They won some, they lost some. We weren't supposed to keep score. My wife keeps score. That's another story. But what I noticed was the emphasis was always on help each other out. Just try and do your best and have fun and be kind to the other team. I mean, that was all I ever really saw, and the skills were taught and the skills were learned. And so what is it about coaching that really kind of drives your passion and is kind of, you know, another piece of evidence of those spiritual gifts at play?
I think with coaching, I approach it, I feel like I approach it totally different than the way that I approach teaching. I say that, but like with my classroom, on the first day of school, we always talk about, you know, you have this incredible opportunity in the classroom to become a family. And I always tell them, you know, because we're going to spend more waking hours together in the classroom than you're going to spend with your own real life blood family at home, whoever that may be. I said, but you have an opportunity here to create what you think is your ideal family. We can do that together. Whenever I approach it as a team, I really want the players to see each other, to know each other, to cheer each other on. Because there's nothing more fun and more exciting as a player to hear someone on your team say, you know, great job, Joel, you did amazing. Great kick, great goal, good job on defense. I mean, like, hearing your teammates root you on, that meant more to me as a player than it did to hear people in the stands, and it did to hear my parents, especially what my parents have said. But I took so much weight from that, from the other players, from hearing them cheer me on. So that's kind of the direction that I took from coaching, is cheer each other on. Cheer on the other team. They scored on us. Don't get my son was the worst at getting mad if they got scored on. And so we talked about at length, you know, well, okay, they scored on you, but what are you going to do next? You know, early on, I think that if you can build that understanding of how you can approach the game with a positive mindset, you know, everything else is just going to come along. And especially with children like ages 4 to 6, like, we're going to just have fun, you know, like, and if they're having fun, if they're smiling. Even the little boy who came up to me the very first day, 5 minutes, and he said, Coach Lineberger, I said, yeah. I said, are we done yet? Almost, buddy. Almost.
Or the night that it was a late practice and my daughter tried to fall asleep sitting on a soccer ball in the middle of the field.
That's okay.
The one thing, and you may not even remember this, one of the things that stuck with me that again reinforced that this is bigger than not just the wrong word. This is bigger than being a volunteer coach. There's something more at play here. We finished the game and the kids always go and they high five each other and shake hands, the teams and all that. And I don't know how it caught my eye, but I watched Joel as that all ended. He walked straight over to one of the kids on our team and their parent. And he very, very kindly said, you know, when we high five each other, we don't do it aggressively. We do it in a way that makes the other person feel good. It was a teachable moment, even in that moment, after 45 minutes of trying to wrangle these little kids all over the field. It was just quite interesting. So we've got this theme kind of going here about, you know, Joe just jumps into things, it seems like. He's willing to do things, that's great. But if you can see that there's something greater at play in a lot of this because of the way it's carried out and the way it's done. And Joel and I even talked about it. And it was like, well, maybe I haven't spent a lot of time about saying, well, this is my gift and this is not, and that's okay. It's one of the things I think that we're trying to do here is to be a little more intentional about thinking about those things, not in an egotistical way by any means, but in a way of just kind of acknowledging that and then giving thanks for those gifts that we've been given. I'm going to come to your passion here in a moment, two of your passions in a moment, but before I do that, real quickly, tell folks, you were telling me in ministry, I love this concept with the kids, that you have an eat at one table requirement. Tell, again, this is one of those things where gifts are at play here. It's not just about going through the motions of running some program or activity.
So with my youth, on Sundays we have a meal together. We have dinner, and I love my church because they've been so amazing to step up and to provide those meals on Sunday evening at like 5:30. They come and they, a lot of times, like, I remember Melanie, she made these amazing chicken and dumplings, and oh, they were so good. But my rule is anytime, like when we're eating together, we sit at one table. I don't want to see, the high scores at one table and the middle scores at another table, or this group over here, this group over here. Like I saw, like my first time I saw them starting to like pair off, and like I saw 15 youth at like 10 different tables. And I was like, that's not gonna work. I said, we're gonna all sit at one table. So we sat at one round table, and it gets tight. I mean, it gets really, really tight, but I think it's important that we see each other and we talk to each other, and we're able to look across the table at each other to be a part of that. Even upstairs in our youth room, we've got two youth rooms. We've got one that we call our work room and one we call our lounge room. The lounge room has all these couches and stuff in it and everything. But in our work room, we have one big table with chairs all around it. And, there's been 2 or 3 times that we've come there and we were out of chairs. And they said, well, do we need to get another table and chairs? I said, no, we just need more chairs, y'all. We're going to squeeze in and make it work. So, and it's funny because right before Christmas, we were there on Sunday, and a couple of youth had come in and they were sitting down at another table. And one of the youth, Ella, said, hey, y'all squeeze over so they can fit in. I was like, yes!
You kind of know that you got them.
Yeah.
I just love that concept of, we're all just one. We're all together. All right, we've got a few minutes left, but let's now to a couple of your passions, and I'm going to combine them. So the new things that I learned about Joel that I didn't know. I mean, I know he was a teacher. I know he was a coach. I knew he ran the pool in the summer. All those fun things. What I learned was that Joel is an avid guitar player, and particularly when it comes to like worship music. But that Joel also combines that guitar playing with one of his other loves, which is community service, which he tends to do with his family. And so how did, I don't know, you're going to say, I don't know, but how did those gifts come about? Or what, let's say it this way. What's been the impact of having those gifts on your life?
One of the combining the community service, which is a huge part to my heart and to my family's. Again, here I get emotional because I'm talking about the children. But is being able to combine those when we go and we serve at the Gasoline Street Ministry. And that happened because I didn't think about telling you this, but I thought about it on the way home when me and Wyatt were talking about it, because he's like, Daddy, we got to go do that again real soon. I was like, I know, buddy, it's like next Thursday. And what happened is our preacher was standing up in front of the church saying, we need people to volunteer for this, volunteer for this. And I was just kind of sitting there kind of in a daze. And Hannah, my middle child, she was already thinking about her community service project for her to be on safety patrol at Ida Rankin. And she said after church, I want that. I was like, my heart overflows. I loved it. So we went and talked to the lady who was over it, Suella, and we said, Suella, what do we need to do to be able to help out with this? She's like, oh, you play the guitar, don't you? You can play the music. Well, yeah, we can do that too. And so our family, me and my 3 kids and my wife, we go and most of the times I'll get the chance to stand up there and give the message, and then we'll play songs, and Carrie will sing, and my kids are up there singing with us, and then we'll get to help serve food to the homeless in Gastonia.
This is the part that I hope you picked up, or one of the parts I hope you picked on. Wyatt's in the first grade, right?
Yes.
He started by saying, my son said, hey, Dad, we have to go do that again soon. From a first grader. I mean, that's having instilled something. That's helping your own kids realize what our blessings are and what our gifts are and what our needs to share back with others.
There's nothing like seeing your 6-year-old son sit at a table with homeless people. Like, they're right there, like he's just talking to them like they're his best friend. Like, he just springs right open.
I know.
It's a beautiful thing.
So you don't know this, but my son grew up with his dad running homeless shelters. And he was like, well, doesn't everybody at some point get a chance to go mop the floor in a homeless shelter? At one point, it's like, well, no, they don't. But that's phenomenal. So a couple of things here that, as I think about spiritual gifts and how we identify them and how we give thanks for them, a couple of things, when we had Dump here last month, a couple of things came out in that conversation. Yeah, he's been to Ukraine and etc. But he had these themes of his gifts of the ability to listen and the ability to be comfortable in uncomfortable places, etc. And as I'm sitting here listening to Joel, a couple of things kind of come out in addition to humility, which, brother, that's one of your gifts, whether you like it or not. It's pretty obvious. But another one is this ability to put others in the spotlight, as he talked about Scott's kind of spotlight analogy. But this ability and this desire to put others in the spotlight. And then this ability to just being open to doing. It's like, you've said this to me several times, why me? But then you followed it up a couple of times also with, but why not me?
Right.
And that's just kind of living out what God's calling us to do, with maybe not necessarily thinking it or putting a whole lot of emphasis around that.
Yeah.
So how do you react to me saying, hey, look, it looks like those could very well be gifts that God has bestowed on you. How do you react to that? How do you feel?
Again, I'm not anybody special. I'm just your average guy. I remember whenever I was a kid and being in like the 5th or 6th grade, I remember sitting in class thinking, I remember it was 6th grade, it was 6th grade Miss Needs class. So I was sitting there thinking, I've got brown hair. Most people have brown hair. I've got brown eyes. Most people have brown eyes. Good. I'm going to be average. I just want to be average. I don't want to be super tall. I don't want to be super skinny. I don't want to be super. I just don't want to be. I want to be average. I don't want to be super smart. I want to be. I just want to be average. And I think
You wanted to fly under the radar.
Not under the radar. I just want to just stay right here. I just want to be right there. And I just that's the way I feel still about myself. I guess that same 6th grader Joel just kind of sticks with me. But I will say this. I remember. I think we had talked about it when we were talking the other night, is that there was a moment when I was as an administrator, and I was at church, and one of my friends, who is a little bit younger than me, was being recognized for all the work that he had done for our church. And I remember sitting there thinking, golly, Josh has done so much for our church, and he's younger than I am, and look at this example that he is. He's doing incredible. God, I wish I could do more for my church. I wish I was the one doing more for my church to be able to help out like that. And then suddenly I didn't even realize the things, the doors that God had opened to allow me to do stuff. And it just happened in that one split moment that, and I'll be quite honest with you, there was a slight twinge of jealousy there, because I was like, man, he just does it. He just does this. And then, and truly, it's from Josh's example that it really hit me then in regards to like being a part of my church, like a willing part of my church, is I heard all these things that he was doing for our church. And I just prayed, man, God, I wish I could do more for my church. And it wasn't like 2 weeks later, someone said, well, can you help out with the parking lot ministry? Sure, whatever, that's fine. I enjoyed it. Then someone else was like, hey, can you cover this Sunday for the praise team? They're not, sure, whatever. Can you cover while we're looking for a new praise minister for the next 6 months? Sure, whatever. It just kept.
So part of it is then not necessarily even to kind of say, well, until I figure out what my gifts are, I'll just kind of sit on the sidelines. That sometimes the coming to know what your gifts are involves doing. Right. And figuring out, the things that you like doing, but maybe they're not your gifts, but then the other things that you're really passionate about that truly are your gifts. So I think that's a good kind of, reminder to all of us. So as we come to kind of the end of our time, Joel, I want to thank you first of all for being here and being willing to share with us. I also want to thank you for everything that you do in the community, because you have impacted my family's life in some very meaningful ways, and I'm certainly grateful and appreciative of that. I'm appreciative of the fact that you have God that God has you in and amongst us. The other thing I want to thank you for, which is your willingness to sit up here and talk about yourself in a way that's vulnerable. And this is something Jeff and I have had this conversation, and Jeff was like, as we go through this, if we can also, help people realize vulnerability is okay. And it actually can be a strength, and it can be a way that we then learn more about ourselves and more about what God has for us. That's a powerful thing. So thank you for modeling that, even though you certainly weren't asked to do it, but just that's just natural for you. So thank you so much for doing this tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me. It's just a cool opportunity, and I love what's going on here, and the church and all of you will definitely be in my prayers that you find something that you're passionate for, that and I'll tell you, you pray to God one time and it's going to happen whether you realize it's happened or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a reminder, our next activity is on Wednesday, April 5th. And again, Jeff, thank you for letting us have these first Wednesdays of the month to do it when we know that people are going to be here for supper anyway. So thank you for doing that. But on the 5th, that Wednesday, we're going to have our kind of follow-up spiritual gifts workshop. And I've enlisted Jeff to help me with this one. And so you're just going to have to kind of come and figure out whatever it is we cook up, because we haven't cooked it up yet. But I'm sure it's going to be worth wanting to come and see what's in store for the next step as we take this journey around discerning our gifts for us individually, for our church, and then ways to put those into practice, which is important for not only us as individual followers of Christ, but also for our church that we deeply love and we care about. So please tune in for that one. Joel did say that he would stick around for a few minutes if you wanted to chat or ask him any questions. And I'm not going to put you on the spot like I did Dunk last month. I put Jeff on the spot the other day, and my wife gets all over me on that. So if y'all wouldn't mind, if we bow your heads, I'll close us in prayer tonight. Lord, thank you for the opportunity for us to just be together, and for us to talk and listen, and for us to have Joel with us and share with us the gifts that you have bestowed on him. And Lord, just thank you for how you bestow gifts on all of us. And Lord, we just pray and we ask your help in helping us each discern what our gifts are for us individually and for our family, and how we can use those for the betterment of our church. Lord, we're just grateful for all the many blessings you bring into our lives. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank y'all. We appreciate it.